And we are live. Welcome to the Sunday School Saturday edition. Greetings and salutations, Focus Up family. This is the February 3, 2024. And this we're gonna give Brother Charles X the platform to speak. We can only do so much, we can only cover so much news on the Focus Up show. But now we got an hour of Charles X to put it down and give us this good information. And the theme of this show is Trump versus the world. Trump has been vilified by many people, and maybe Charles X is going to make the argument that a lot of this is unfair. So let me turn it over to you, brothers. And again, thank you for watching on YouTube, on various other platforms, and catching this live and on replay, and check it out. So go ahead, Brother Charles X. I pass the floor to you.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it, brother. My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. So today in this particular podcast, we're going to be dealing with some various knowledge that maybe not everyone is always exposed to, or maybe, it's presented to them in a slant. So we're going to look at things from an objective standpoint. About me, I've been abstaining from voting for a president since Obama's second term, which means that I didn't vote for Obama the second time. I didn't vote for Trump, either time. But now as we come into this 2024 election, I'm undecided in terms of whether should I abstain or should I vote for Trump. So as I go through various research and data information, I'm also in that process of trying to decide, what I'm going to do. So some of my apprehension in regards to Trump, is, some of Trump's base, and their beliefs and whatnot, they rub me the wrong way. In various instances, the Trump's imperious nature, has been something that kind of rubbed me the wrong way as well. His aggression in the Middle East, is something that, I've also had some concerns with. The handling of the C-19 vaccine, that he did at the end of his term, the last time he was in office, I had some questions. So, with your help, brother, let's just go through some of these thoughts and ideas and kind of wrestle through them and just see where we come out with.
How does that sound? It sounds great. And before we start, I need to put this disclaimer out there. Okay, we both identify as right of center. So again, I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, and I know that I've made a lot of criticisms of Trump in the past, but I've always made it a point to talk about the good things that he did as well. Again, nobody's all bad. That's just not how it works. In the movies, you got the person with the black hat and the person with the white hat, and it is what it is. But in the real world, in real time, there's shades of everything. So that's why, again, I've never been in the business of bashing Trump. I'm not going to be in the business of bashing Trump today. But I will address some issues. So let's get to the first thing up, your first question was, who runs this world? What you got to say about this, Brother Charles X?
Yeah, brother, I'd like to let's go ahead and deal with that. Who runs this world? If you're looking from a Christian point of view, they would tell you that Satan rules the world, and I don't think they're too far, from the truth. In general, when we look at, in the past, in the more recent past, who has run this world, America has had a lot of influence and dominance, which has since passed as we come into 2024. So now we're seeing obviously the rise of nations like China, Russia, the various BRICS nations that are participating in various economic and even, some military alliances that exist, and so now, it's just going to be a question of, okay, well, if America is ruling the world, then we got to go ahead and look at, okay, well, what's running America? Who's in control, who's in power here? In particular over our foreign policy and decision making. And so that's something that we're definitely going to take a dive in. What are your thoughts on this?
As far as who runs the world, governments run the world after a fashion. For the most part, governments run the world. But, you're always going to have pockets of rich people, powerful people, gangster people, and positions of influence that have effect over various aspects. The world is just too big to be run by one person. But as a person of the faith that I am, and we talked about, to me, I do believe that the devil is real. And you got to understand, the devil doesn't need you to do anything in particular. All the devil needs is chaos. And that's what I think, that's the devil's purpose. But when you're talking about these governments, I don't believe that their purpose is chaos. I believe their purpose is to govern their particular situation how they see it fit. So, whether those people are over there, out of the country, the people in here, you talk about the rich families that make decisions as far as what's going to be the books or the curriculums and all these other type of decisions, what food we're going to eat, what's going to be in the schools. Sorry about the cough, but there's a lot of individual decisions that have to be made, and it's just too big of a landscape to be just completely controlled by a small few. So there's a lot of people that have a play in all of this stuff, but some people have more impact than others. So I think that's what we're going to talk about. So what do you got to say, brother?
Yes, sir. The only thing I would add to that is that, in today's age that we're living in now, we had to look at more than just nations, because it appears that nations play second fiddle to corporations. Many of these corporations, bro, if you look at the amount of revenue that they control, the amount of attention that they have actually, a more of an audience, a more spending power than whole nations combined. Facebook, which is a platform we're broadcasting on today, has over 1 billion individuals, here on that particular platform. And of course, when you look at, some of the monies that they're generating and they have access to, again, we're talking in the billions. You see what I'm saying? So that's just one of the aspect that we had to look at, when it comes to this, is that, yes, we're talking about nations, but at the same time, we got to look at some of these corporations, in particular, when it comes to, big pharma, and big tech, which are these media companies.
And that's what I was about to say, big media, which is the fact of the matter. These corporations are the ones that are running these media companies that will tend to color their coverage how they tend to cover it. So it's not necessarily so much a function of expressing the truth as much as what's going to be great TV. And sometimes that can take you to dark places. But we ready to go on? We still want to talk about who runs the world, or you want to go on to the next one?
Yes, sir. Let's go ahead and transition to the next question, which is, what is the greatest evil on the planet today and in the past? I myself think it's pretty much the same answer, where we're talking about today or the past, but surely, as much as Trump is vilified, is it Trump? Is he the greatest evil on the planet today? What's your thoughts?
100% he is not the the greatest evil today. Trump only has so much power. He has a lot of power. He has a lot of sway and a lot of influence. And that's why a person like me, I'm not concerned about, putting Trump in jail. Trump as a powerful person, I believe this. Look, I understand that there's a lot of people that are in power that maybe run this cartel, maybe do all this stuff that they're not of the best things for humanity. I mean, even the people that run these cigarette companies, but they still have power. And I feel like if you have power, I'd rather try to motivate those people that have power to use power in a more positive way. So I don't want to silence Trump. I would try to say that, look, there's certain things that he bangs the table on that I agree with, and certain things that are going to benefit the people. But then there's some things that become just about sort of like him looking out for himself or digging into a position he made from the past. And, we got to be okay with evolving. We got to be okay with saying, you know what? I was sincere when I assessed that situation before and came to that conclusion. But now that I have more information, now that I have more wisdom, now that I have more perspective, it's okay for me to pivot into something else. And I don't think that that's one of his strengths. I think that he's a person that's going to dig in. He takes an original position and he's going to die with that. And I think that we got to be okay with saying that, look, it was logical for me to do that, but now it's logical for me to do this other thing. And now I have to pivot. So, that's what I would say. But as far as the greatest evil are the people that are committing genocide. Trump's not committing genocide. The greatest evilest people are out there trafficking children and stuff like that. Trump ain't doing that. You know what I'm saying? So the bottom line is there's far more evil out there. When you talk about the people that are going to war, killing thousands and thousands of people. This is a far greater evil than anything that you could accuse Trump of. So he is by far not the greatest evil today.
Well, brother, I think on most points, in many points, I would say that we have more in agreement than we have in disagreement. And I would absolutely agree with you that no, it's not Trump. He's not the greatest evil at all. But it is indeed human trafficking and how humans are treated on this planet, which you alluded to when you were just talking about what was on your mind, and also war. You mentioned genocide. Well, oftentimes when genocide is being committed, it's in the act of war. So as we look at Israel right now, reports that have come out before, it was on the Palestinian side, they were producing numbers that they were sharing with the world that at first America and Israel were refuting, but now even they are agreeing with the numbers that are being presented, which is to date, Israel has killed over 27,000 people. Over 66,000 are wounded, and 2/3. And now, again, these are not only conservative numbers that we're talking about right now, but these are pretty much our agreed upon fact and accurate numbers we're talking about. But of those numbers we just mentioned, 27,000 being killed and 66,000 being wounded, over 2/3 of that are women and children. You see what I'm saying? So when we're talking about a great evil, clearly we could agree that that's not good. That's not humane. That is not, justice, at all. And again, when we look at the war taking place over in Ukraine right now, regardless of the politics, the fact is that neither Israel nor Ukraine would even be able to commit and the moves and decisions that they're making without the sign off from America, in particular, the sign off being billions of dollars of weapons and resources. You see what I'm saying? So inside of that Ukrainian conflict, which I'm not a fan of their government is a Nazi government, have a bunch of Banderanites, and that's a different topic. But, over 500,000 men and women in that conflict from the Ukrainian side have been killed. And on the Russian side, it's pretty much one for every one death that's taking place, or I should say between every 10 and 12 deaths taking place on the Ukrainian side, Russia is losing one. So it is a huge ratio and a huge difference, which is showing that obviously as a larger nation that Russia clearly has already won this battle, and Ukraine cannot win. In fact, right now Ukraine is actually recruiting. Now, I shouldn't say recruiting. They're taking men and women off buses headed to work to try to fill their ranks because they're losing so many men and women that they're going to keep putting them through the meat grinder. As we speak. So this is in my estimation, a great wickedness and a great evil that's taking place. So the question ends up becoming, okay, well, dealing with these situations, this human trafficking, and this war, when we're looking at our politicians here, in particular Trump and Biden in this election cycle, who is best equipped to deal with that reality, to make that situation more justified, and deter these events from happening. So that's something that we're going to definitely get into, for sure. Well, you have anything else you want to add on that topic?
Well, one thing I have to say about the Ukrainian war, I can't sit there and say that this is a war that they can't win, because the fact of the matter is Putin could either be overtaken government-wise, or he could just die. And then you might have a next person up there that just doesn't believe in the same agenda and just stops it. I mean, there's sometimes, just fighting a war and holding up to a certain point in time where you end up with someone in power that's making a decision, that a policy that can be somewhat harmonious with you, can deliver you that victory. So I can't say that. I'm definitely not going to co-sign and try to make arguments for the Ukrainian government. And we know that there's a lot of racist components to a lot of stuff that was done there. But I mean, I do understand the fundamental basic concept. If these are your allies, I understand why you work with your allies. But again, you don't give your allies a free pass to do wickedness. One thing that's kind of messy about the Israel situation is that, just because Israel as a policy is making all these decisions that are harming a lot of these Palestinians that really don't have much of a say or control of what Hamas did, because a lot of this is supposed to be a reaction to the Hamas attack. But there's a lot of people in Israel, citizens of Israel, that do not support what the government is doing. And the reality is the government is always a small minority of people in power that don't necessarily reflect what the masses think. So just because the United States does something, that doesn't mean that Mr. Nice Guy is signing off on it, or that doesn't mean that Mr. Brother Charles X is signing off on it. And I'm just saying that there's the world view is really has a very negative look about what the Israeli government is doing over there. I mean, particularly when you're talking about you have a war with these particular people, the Hamas, that's what you say, that's what you're proposing. But the fact of the matter, you have all these Palestinians that are getting caught up with it, and it's not a free pass to just wipe them out. So it's an ugly situation. I understand the concept of being an ally and supporting your ally, especially supporting a nation that thinks like you think. But again, it's not a free pass. It's not a cosign of just whatever they do. And at some point, you got to be like, look, we can't have that blood on our hands too. So, I mean, that's my take on that.
Yes, sir. So just as the kind of push back a little bit is that, from a military standpoint, brother, we have to really admit that, when it comes to Ukraine, Russia, that is over. I mean, just like I said, first of all, Ukraine is a small nation. Russia is a large nation. Russia's lost 50,000 troops. Ukraine has lost over 500,000, 500,000. Now, originally they had ranks of around between 700, 800, 1,000. And then now those are being wiped out. And then as they're replenishing, their troops, these are people who are not combat ready, who are not military trained, or I should say, getting very little training, and they're going against, an empire. Russia's been around for a long, long time, and they're one of the top premier militaries inside of the world. So it's just unlikely that they're going to overpower that. And then in regards to Putin, yes, there is an election coming up in Russia soon. The candidates that are running against them, are being looked at right now by the Russian people as being, proxies from the West. And so that right there has already discouraged them. And then you got to remember that under Putin, he's been in power now, since the late 90s, is that, I argue that Putin is one of the greatest leaders, period, the world has ever seen, ever, period, but definitely inside the last 50 years, to me, is not even a debate. So Putin enjoys over 80% support from the Russian people right now. The Russian economy is, even after sanctions by the United States and them taking out, various restaurants like McDonald's or whatnot, they rebounded, instituted and put their own restaurants in place, and they rebounded from these sanctions to where now Russia is one of the more stable, strongest economies on the planet. So literally everything the Biden administration has done has backfired. You know what I mean?
So let me push back. Let me push back a little. Now, the thing about the Ukrainian thing, I just want to remind you, Vietnam. Sometimes the little thing can still defeat the big imperial thing because of the passion that the investment that one side has in this versus the investment of the other. So again, it is to be determined how this is going to play out. That's the one pushback. The other pushback is your source of information and the narrative that's being sent. You may be 100% correct, brother. At no point, I'm not telling you that you're wrong, but I'm just saying that we understand that when you talk about a government controlling their media, you can talk about how corrupt the American media and stuff like that, but it's a completely different level of control of the media when you're talking about places like Russia and you're talking about places like China. So the information that you get, who's going to be reporting this stuff? Where's this information going to come from? I'm saying that, if you're going to be honest and you're going to be skeptical, if you're going to squint your eye, you're going to be like, I'm not surprised that they color these great success that are happening on there. But the fact of the matter is that the fact that this war is still going on as long as it has is an L for Russia. Now, where it ends up being, it can end up well being a W. And especially if Ukraine needs American support and they lose it, and that's all, then Russia's just gonna win. That's just what it's gonna be. But again, I'm just saying that you talk about how the numbers are, and I'm saying that, look, man, I understand that people are reporting these numbers. You say that to me, I respect you, but I don't necessarily respect those numbers. I don't know how true that is. As far as how their economy is doing, I would hope to think that as resourceful, as a powerful, as a self-controlling, situation would be able to. I don't root for Russia to struggle. I may have an issue with a guy that's in control of Russia, and I'm not saying I do. I'm saying I could have a problem with their policy, but I don't root against any nation of people. We are all sharing this planet. China, Russia, United States, Mexico, whatever. You know what I'm saying? To me, people are people, so I'm going to root for the people no matter what. Now, what these governments do, I'll speak on that. I'll criticize that. I'll talk on that. But I don't know. You still want to? You got something else on this, or?
Sure. I think it's good to go ahead and exhaust this point. Dealing with this because it's critical in really looking at ultimately who we lean towards in terms of this next election. And again, like with me, when it comes to information and data that I'm gathering when it comes to these numbers, is first I'm looking at what both sides are saying, both the Ukrainians and the Russians are saying, but then I'm also looking at various independent observers, so someone who I lean on real heavily, is a gentleman by the name of Scott Ritter, who's a former weapons inspector, and actually played a role in denuclearizing nations, during the Clinton administration, I believe, is when he first really got tapped. But he's a Marine, someone who's very objective and has proven to be trustworthy through the years. There's also Colonel Douglas McGregor, who actually served in the Trump administration. He's very connected. Serves as a senior fellow with the American Conservative. Again, a former advisor to the Secretary of Defense. During the Trump administration. People like Ray McGovern, CIA analyst of 27 years. And has been around since the JFK. You know what I'm saying? Larry Johnson, again, another respected CIA analyst. Moved from the State Department's Office of Counterterrorism. And has been around for a long, long time. So when I'm getting data, I'm also getting it from independent journalists that's on the ground. So I don't rely on really one source of information. I'm looking at it from a wide range of viewpoints to come up with the truth. Now, in regards to the length of the war,
wait. It's to come up with what you think is the truth. I mean, we're making an effort. None of us know.
Sir. I would say is what I think. But like I said, pretty much, when it comes to the numbers I'm presenting right now, they're really unrefuted. In terms of people who are dealing with, a knowledgeable, respected, inside of the geopolitical sphere. These are numbers that aren't even debated anymore. You know what I'm saying? At all.
Reasonable to be relied upon.
Okay,
I'm saying
I can go with that.
Yeah. So I'm just saying,
Yeah, I can go with that. But now, in terms of the length of the war that you discussed, now you talked about, that is being something that is a negative for Russia. I have a different take on that altogether, as well as other and I don't report to be an expert. I just study what various experts and individuals say. Is that from the length of the war, this has been something very strategic and smart by Russia because they're not making any mistakes, and that because they're a bigger, stronger, a nation, they could afford to draw this thing out, and take their time and not rush, and make a mistake that could prove, tragic for them. So, the fact that they're not losing as many troops at all that Ukraine is actually dealing with is really something that is not good, for the Ukrainians at all, and that they should push for peace. You know what I mean? There's an old statement, you know, I forgot the gentleman who made it, but he said, make peace, you fools. You know what I mean? This is something I said a long time ago that should happen because, again, Russia would not even be, you know, in this this conflict were it not for the American government, you know, trying to use, you know, these Ukrainians, you know, to hurt and harm Russia. You know what I mean? And by wanting to put a NATO base there in the Ukraine, inside that region that's so strategically important for Russia, Russia had no choice but to act as they have in this situation. And they never wanted to. But now things will never be the same because Russia had to pay with the blood of their soldiers. Now they gain the grounds they did, and they're not going to leave themselves in position to where this can happen again. So Ukraine is done. They've already lost significant portions of Ukraine, which will also ultimately, you know, include the whole region of Crimea in the first place, you know, which was what, you know, some of the battle was even about, you know what I mean? So that's really all I had to say on that particular subject. Is there anything else you want to add, brother?
Yeah, I really don't want to dig too deep in that. I will say that Russia is a nuclear superpower. The threat to Russia is not as grave as is being made. And when you're talking about a sovereign nation, I'm saying the sovereign nation should always have the right to defend its sovereignty. But let's not dig too much in that. The next question is, should Black people be concerned with American politics? I love this question. Go ahead.
I love it too, brother. Yes, sir. I say absolutely, without a doubt, yes, we should be concerned with it. Now, the irony is, as much as you know, I believe that we need to be concerned with American politics. You know, when you look at, you know, the enthusiasm among the masses of our people, it just doesn't really exist, which just completely baffles me. You know what I mean? And it's hard for me to understand, you know, and particularly since we literally we're in Black History Month, you know what I mean? They call it, you know, here in February, we literally had, you know, many of our leaders and predecessors die to give us the right to access to the political system. You know what I mean? Through voting, you know, of course, and whatnot, you know what I mean? And to be able to own property, you know, these are things that people literally died to give us that opportunities that we have today. You know what I mean? And so when you're dealing with laws, you know, there's many laws that are still today, you know, but definitely in the past that has adversely impacted us. You know what I mean? So how are you going to change those laws? You know what I mean? If you're not, you know, a part of, you know, this political system, or at least, you know, trying to maneuver. Now, the only other way that we can make it irrelevant is if we create a nation within a nation. You know what I mean? And we had economic power and base and resources to where we could ignore the American politicians or even influence them by making donations of our own that would be in our best interest. But we don't act as a unipolar nation at all in terms of a group of people. You know what I mean? We're very diverse in our thinking, you know what I mean? And then, you know, arguably, you know, what's in the interest of our so-called Black women and Black men are completely different in a lot of different ways. You know what I mean? You know, so, you know, but yes, to go back to the question, yes, we should be very concerned and active in American politics.
My policy is this. If you want something, if you want some type of a victory, I always say, give yourself your best chance. I understand that voting for this person doesn't necessarily mean whatever desired result is going to play out. But the bottom line is, by taking advantage of every opportunity in front of you to succeed, this will give you your best shot at being successful. So I would dare say I have a shotgun approach at everything. There's a time to use a scalpel, and then there's a time to do everything. And I'm just saying that vote too. This is a tool and the utensil. He's absolutely right. People died for this. They care so much about your voting power is that there are people that are still working today to take it away from you or to diminish it because it's impactful. Things really do happen. Whether this person is the president or that person the president matters, because just like a chef cooking you food, it's going to be different. Everybody's going to have different priorities. Everybody's going to have their own individual impact on something. So whoever it is in any position of power, and trust me, people are delegated and have power after a fashion at what they do. Who they are, how they think, what they do will have a trickle down effect on you. And it's just you have an opportunity to participate and have some say. Speak up your mind, do it, and say something. So I would dare say that. But I want to distinguish one thing. When I talk about Black people being concerned about American politics, white people, I kind of feel have a different thing going on in this situation. Because when you talk about stuff like MAGA, they're like, make America great again. And that's because, they have a concept. America is their concept. I don't view America as Black people's concept. I feel like we're here and we got to make the best of what we're here. We've been so far away from where we used to be that we don't even really have those ties. We kind of have to dig into what we have here. This is where our rights are. This is where our power is. This is where our riches is. This is where our culture is. So we have a vested interest in this thing, but we have a different degree of ownership in the concepts that constitute America. So it creates a different perspective as far as, what we rah about. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, make America how it was. I'm not going to say whatever. What I'm just saying is, look, we're all here together. We need to figure out something. Let's make it the best that we can make it. That's where I would come from.
Yes, sir. I don't disagree with you, at all, and what you were just saying. The one thing that I would just add is that, as a people, we should form various voters blocks, block not as in like, on the block, if you will, BOLOCK, but BLOC, which is, generally, if you form these by ideology, but still obviously, racially as well, then you could start putting together your own candidates and promoting your own candidates and bringing them to office to actually represent your own interests. The problem that we have today is that those of us, many of those who are in, politics right now who look like us, are ruled by various special interest groups, and interests who buy politicians and very rarely, if ever, act in our own best interests. Many of these, like the Black Caucus, for example, many of these individuals, are more beholden into various Zionist interests, meaning Zionists being those that put Israel ahead of the United States. And are a big pharma, big tech, like we mentioned before, in terms of corporations. I'm doing a study right now, and so I'm not going to reveal all the study because I'm still gathering facts. But the NAACP, they're actually registered as lobbyists, so they've been lobbying on behalf of various pharmaceuticals. That when you really look into it, these pharmaceuticals, and especially there's one I'm thinking right now that's dealing with weight loss, is not even in the best interest of other people. It's some type of drug that someone's supposed to take for the rest of their lives, and instead of promoting, people to exercise, to eat more healthy, and avoid some of those traditional foods that are causing us a lot of problems with diabetes and a lot of other comorbidities, instead, the NAACP is focused on getting this money, from these big pharma, who want them to lobby on their behalf. You see what I'm saying? So, we have to be very careful at looking at even those who look like us. Are they actually repping our best interests? Because there might be someone who does not look like us that is really promoting solutions that are in our better interest than, those, again, who are in our own flesh and blood and skin tone.
Now, I was a little shocked that you had this question here. But I guess we're going to present two sides of why one would argue. I don't think that either of us is trying to get you to influence the audience one way or the other. We're just going to tell you kind of where our thoughts are right now. So I don't know if you wanted to start this off or whether you thought that this was something I was supposed to start off.
I would say that, it'd be hard for me to make an argument of why Biden over Trump, 2024, because, anyone who follows me, on Facebook in particular, that's mainly where I do a lot of postings. And it's not that I have this, I have very few people that follow, because I really just, when it comes to my posts, I'm really sharing just I treat Facebook almost like a diary, you know what I mean? And something to where I could direct someone, who I meet to go ahead, check out the various posts I've done, and then they could get a synopsis of who I am, what I stand for, what I'm about. So I use it as a marketing tool, but I don't necessarily promote it out looking to get, more people who follow me or whatnot. As I build this show up, and participate in these various debates, maybe that's something that I'll go ahead and change, moving forward, But, anyone who follows me, will understand that, I've been arguing against Black people voting for Democrats for a long time now, because, the Democrats really haven't shown that they have our best interests at heart. And when you look at the challenges that still exist among our people, in terms of politically, the Democrats have not resolved any of those issues, even though we vote, at a 90 plus clip, for Democrats. You see what I'm saying? So again, it'll be hard for me to argue why Biden over Trump, but are there any type of, arguments that you could think of, that you would say, that it'd be better for, Black people to vote for Biden, or people in general vote for Biden over Trump?
I would dare say this. Again, I'm not trying to convince or sway anybody one way or the other. But if I were to make an argument of why Biden over Trump and to make this objective argument, I would say if you are a person that believes in clean energy, if you're a person that believes in that solar power and wind power, and that these things are a more productive way for humanity to go than fossil fuels, this would be an argument of why you would vote for someone like Biden. If you want to talk about inclusiveness, as far as the rights of the the minorities that feel marginalized, especially if you want to talk about the LGBTQ community, you might lean towards Biden versus Trump just because the position that he's taken. When you talk about liberals, when I think about Republicans and Democrats, I've always thought that they were important sides of the same coin. I thought that the Democrats were ideological and that the Republicans were practical. And that sometimes you got to be ideological. There's sometimes you have to want something different and to risk something and think about something and to be open to stuff. And then there's a time to be practical about this and rein it in and be sensible and look at the bigger picture of it. So I've never looked at either side as sort of the villain per se. And so, I don't necessarily consider myself a liberal as far as my personal beliefs, but as far as my policies, we all are here together. So I'm not trying to enforce my thought process on the next person. If just because this person is LGBTQ or whatever, I want them to have every single right that I have. I don't want them to be discriminated against. I don't want them to be bullied. I want them to feel in a safe space. I'm going to use whatever pronoun you want me to use to refer to you because it's easy. I'm using one label. If you want to just switch it out and give me another label, it's not a hard thing for me to do. So that's the type of that I don't get upset about that. I don't have a fear of wokeness that I get upset every time that the goalpost gets moved as far as what people might consider as respectful or disrespectful. So these are sort of like examples. If you want to talk about how people who think about how like police brutality, when you want to talk about how when we talk about hey, the police should not get a free pass for what they do, one side has been leaning more to giving the police a free pass than the other side. So, and if you want to talk about policy and getting stuff done, to me, that's a legitimate beef because, again, a president can only do so much. If you can stick somebody in the kitchen to cook you some food, but if you don't give them, food and utensils, as far as, the control in the Senate and the House, there's only so much you're going to do. And if these two sides aren't willing to actually be okay with working with something and doing bipartisan things, if one side is occupied with not giving the other side a win, no matter what, those are the things that would get in the way of it. And again, Charles X, I'm not saying that that's the case. I'm just saying that if it is the case, that is going to be counterproductive. You're not going to be able to accomplish anything. So those are examples of why someone would want to lean over, on the Biden side, because, and the fact of the matter is the economy is doing a whole lot better than a lot of people have postulated. I know that a lot of times when we have the big recessions and the big whatever, when everybody's been doing too much, being a fat cat, this is usually under Republican reign. And then what usually they end up doing is running to the Democrats to bring the economy back in order. This happened with Clinton. This happened with Obama. So, I'm not saying that's been happening the case with Trump, because unfairly what happened to Trump is COVID. He didn't create COVID, but COVID did undertake a lot of stuff that he was doing positive economic wise. But you could make the argument that his failure to attack it in a superior way might have lessened the economic impact that it had. But, again, these are arguments that one would make on the other side. I'm not saying, that I have one position or the other. So I don't know if you want to take this opportunity to flip over to the Trump side.
Yeah, before we do that, let me just say that, I appreciate you sharing that, because you're absolutely right, in terms of why Biden over Trump, clean fuel, I can understand that point. Definitely, without a doubt, LGBTQ plus, those type of individuals, is no doubt that the more friendly administration would be, the Democrats on that. When it comes to abortion, abortion, that's one that, you probably will lean more, a Democrat, being Biden over Trump. Although, the one thing I like about Trump that I appreciate is that, he is taking a standpoint of, more letting the states decide instead of having some sort of national, referendum saying that, okay, look, you can't have abortions, by a certain, and setting those, whatever those limits are going to be. He's saying let the states decide.
And let me jump in and say, I think that was an evolution. So contrary to what I said about Trump, I was shocked when he took that position. And to me, that was a person that did pivot. So he did pivot on that.
Yeah, politically it was wise, because anything different would have been suicide. So so at the very least we can say he's smart for that. Yeah, without doubt. The other thing I would say is that why you would vote Biden over Trump is that if you're pro-war, and you believe that America needs to be attacking Iran, involved inside the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, involved with trying to defeat Russia, then, you wouldn't want to lean more Democrat, because, even though on the Republican side, you have that neocon, type of approach, that's not Trump's focus, although, like I say, he's not perfect when it comes to these issues, because, again, he definitely has plenty of aggression towards many of these Muslim Middle Eastern nations in his administration, but in terms of leaning more on the side of avoiding these conflicts and setting up barriers in place that would discourage these actions, he did a better job on that. Also, if you're more about globalism and open borders, that's something that Democrats, are the champions of, which we will get into this border crisis as we come into the next part of why Trump, over Biden, but that's something that I will also say that is something that is more of a Democratic platform. The economy, there's definitely, people argue about this, but, the economy is definitely hurting. It's not what it was. UPS just announced major, layoffs, going on with them, which is telling us in terms of people buying products and goods and needing to have, a logistics company get it to them. So that means there's a downtick in that happening, so that's not good for the economy. And also I would say that, these various wars that are now have more of an emphasis and focus on, sending resources into these conflicts, which from a geopolitical standpoint is impacting shipping routes, and which means the prices of goods are rising, and we're going to start seeing hyperinflation. These are things that are not good for the economy. And again, something that from a Democratic standpoint is definitely, something that they're weak in, and it's going to hurt them come this election.
So see, that's the thing. I would dare say, when you talk about the jobs, because I mean, they have objective job reports and stuff like that. The fact of the matter is that has been increasing. When you talk about unemployment, that has stayed low. One of the things that's really bad economic wise is inflation. And inflation was particularly artificially influenced by COVID, because what happened was you are getting a lot of people that were getting the stimulus, and people that were making money that didn't necessarily have to work because they were doing stuff with like Bitcoin or this, whatever reasons that people didn't necessarily need to be in the working market, particularly because, only so many people could be at work and you have remote and all this. You were ending up with a lot of people with having extra money to spend, but because there was less people out there creating product, you had less product to buy. So therefore, that naturally drove up the price of things. So, not to mention when you talk about shipping and all this other stuff, there are all type of logistics that were influenced by this that are driving up inflation. So inflation is the one thing that's absolutely a reflection of a bad situation that's going on. You know what I'm saying? So I don't want to undercut that is an issue, that is a real problem. But as far as jobs, as far as unemployment, that's been steadily improving. So that's really not where it is. As far as the you talk about the war type situation. I'll say that I don't know that if I believe that the Democrats are more into war, but I will say that because Trump was so more focused on what was happening in America and creating stuff here and doing stuff here, I would dare say he was only really more focused on, he wasn't focusing on policing elsewhere. He was focusing on policing here. And that will de facto create the situation that you were talking about. So
make America great again.
You know what I'm saying? So you're basically kind of right on that, honestly. And as far as scaring people from messing with us, there's no question. If you have Trump as the president versus Biden as the president, everybody's much more scared of Trump because that motherfucker is crazy in a good way. Potentially, you know what I'm saying? So So it's just like when you're worried about, like with this whole conflict with where the U.S. just did this strike, they're being trepid because they're being concerned. They feel like, look, Iran didn't launch this, but people that Iran is friendly with did. So we don't want to make sure that we don't go at Iran. So we're going to, try to do this and just target these things. So you see what I'm saying? Whereas Trump is that type of person that might just, slam a hammer, where it's just like they realize that, there's much more exposure to a reaction. So you can definitely make that argument. So I don't know if that makes it time to slide over to the, the Trump side of why you would vote Trump over Biden.
Yeah. Well, let's get to it. In fact, I'm gonna go ahead and turn my hat around back through this one. Because this is the one where I got to go ahead right from the gate and defuse what some of my opponents would say. When it comes to this issue, you ain't black. You know what I mean? So one of the best, most epic clapbacks I ever saw was, I agree with this brother on certain points, but definitely not all of them. When Larry Elder lit that fool Charlamagne the God up, on the Ninja Wake Up Call. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that particular dialogue. Larry Elder, definitely had dealt with him, on that situation of letting this white man Biden come on his platform and tell people and tell him you're not black if you don't vote for me. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, you know what I'm saying? So, my detractors, sometimes they want to play that card, you know what I mean? But first of all, from a credential standpoint, I'm not an active member in the ranks today, but, my pedigree, my background is in the Nation of Islam, FOI. I also served as a grassroots community organizer where I led efforts dealing with police community relations, where I had actually a relationship with the Black Officers Union, which here in Sacramento, later on, the police chief came out of that particular group. I also served on the business and commerce, end of things. And I was a member on the Oak Park Community Association board here inside Sacramento in our neighborhood and where the mosque was, and I've been a laborer that's held many posts inside the nation, So, when it comes to being black, I challenge anybody, in terms of the black card. You know what I mean? Where they stand at. Other people is going to throw out, the fact that, I might be throwing out some so-called conspiracy theories. You know what I mean? And let's look at that word for a second. Conspiracy theory is a label often used to dismiss the thorough, objective analysis of information. Individuals who question the mainstream media, politicians, businesses, etc., their narratives on a given subject, and used to constrain even the most respected thinkers. You know what I mean? So today, oftentimes your so-called conspiracy theories are the obvious conclusions based on the current facts. You know what I mean? And when it comes to our community, man, don't act like, we don't know nothing about conspiracy theories, because it used to be a conspiracy theory to say the government was bringing crack into the communities. You know what I'm saying? Which, it got defused. We found out the exact truth about that. Hell, even more recently, Cat Williams came about, and told us about, the industry in Hollywood and what's taking place there. I like to call it Hollyweird. How they're, having people, dress up in dresses, having men dress up in dresses, and the various messages that are being promoted. That used to be called a conspiracy theory, but today it's not. You see what I'm saying?
We know, like COINTEL. We know that see, that's the thing about it. We got to separate the term conspiracy from conspiracy theories, because we know that conspiracies actually occur. And there was a conspiracy to hold Black people. COINTEL, J. Edgar Hoover, he conspired against Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. So conspiracies do exist. So we don't want to necessarily conflate the conspiracy theory with the conspiracies, because there's a conspiracy theory that the earth is flat. And spoiler alert, it's not.
Right. It's not necessarily one that I support, but again, when it comes to me, statements that I make, they're not uneducated. Many of them are fact checked. I like to come with receipts, data, statistics that are irrefutable. You know what I mean? So that's how I kind of diffuse when it comes to these conspiracy theories.
Hard to refute. Difficult to refute. It's kind of impossible. It's impossible to be irrefutable, because at the end of the day, you're still getting evidence that someone else fed you, and there's a contingency upon them feeding you the right evidence. You're being responsible and reasonable, compiling the evidence that you are, but again, you're not the person that's gathering this information from a first hand. And if someone tells you that, you're relying on them that they're telling you the truth.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
Sometimes that's true.
It's not irrefutable, but it's very difficult to refute, because you're
I would say that there could be some information that's more irrefutable than others if it's widely accepted upon truth and that's been verified. But you're right. In terms of verbiage, I don't want to get
and you're right. If everybody agrees on it, we pretty much accept it as the truth and we move on, because that's rational.
Well, it's a fact, but there's different interpretations now. Because you have people who have the same Bibles, but the same Quran, but they might have a different interpretation of what they're reading. You see what I'm saying?
And different translations of it as well, different versions. Exactly. Of it. King James versus the American Standard versus the Living Bible, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly. So the other thing too that my opponents might say, I want to go ahead and deal with. There's a couple of them. That I want to deal with before I go ahead and get on with the topic. Is I'm not a Trump D-writer. At all. My opinions and information that I'm concluding, I'm looking at what's in the best interest of myself, my family, and people. Oftentimes, that's what I'm looking at. What I'm saying? So I'm as objective as they come when it comes to, situations. But, I do identify in terms of political ideology is, as we mentioned before, I'm a right of center libertarian. So I'm definitely more on the side of having people make their own choices, decisions, and whatnot. But let's make sure that they're armed with, facts, and truth, so they could go ahead and make the best decision for themselves and family. And the last thing I want to mention, is that, although I wouldn't consider myself a promoter of this particular lifestyle, just because I don't promote it and think it's in the best interest of my family, or our people, it does not make me what they label and call homo or transphobic. The people that decide to go that route and do that hey, that's on you. You know what I mean? But it doesn't mean that, I don't have arguments that would, in particular to our people, my own family members, that I would ask us, to rethink, that position. You know what I'm saying? But, I'm definitely someone who does not advocate violence to the community. I've been in a situation where I saw violence happening to someone who identified, as in that LGBTQ plus, category, and I've come to the defense, what I'm saying, because I don't tolerate, someone just, committing some violence, on someone just because, they don't think like you. I don't believe that. You know what I'm saying? So I want to give, that prelude, if you will, to the next topic we're going to be dealing with here, which is, okay, well, if not Biden over Trump, why Trump over Biden? Since I've already talked a little bit, brother, do you want to go ahead and start with this particular situation?
If I were to make an argument of why Trump over Biden, first of all, the border would probably be one of the things, just because you got to check this out. Now both sides are on the issue as far as of the urgency of the border crisis. I will defend, at least say, that the Democrats were never nonchalant. They were never saying that they didn't want to have some type of defense mechanism, where they may have disputed the practicality of the wall. But I remember when they were debating about the wall, they were saying like a superior thing would be this, and that, and this is what we support. So again, I'll give them that. But when you're talking about a person who's going to really step it up and attack the border situation, Trump is going to be that person that's more likely going to be able to get that done. He's a person.
Well, he did it already. You know what I mean? We saw him in action.
After a fashion. I'm just saying that, if you want to talk about as far as security, as far as discouraging other nations from doing things that might, trigger a reaction from America. Again, I already said it. He's a way more scarier person at that button than the Democrats. The Democrats will always, I should say the Democrats, but like with Obama and Biden, they were people that realized that, look, there's repercussions and consequences to me doing this heavy hand. So they're sitting there, whatever. Whereas Trump comes off as gung-ho. So you be very careful about kicking off dirt with someone who's gung-ho. So, I mean, this is a dude he was considering nuclear response to drug cartels. So that's a scary dude. So, you know what I'm saying? That when you talk about a position of power, that's the type of power that I'll lend more respect to than just jumping in front of somebody, in some photo op. But, that's the type of a situation. When you talk about focusing on not concerning yourself with stuff abroad and really, digging into what's happening in America, he definitely comes off as that person who has that greater focus. America, for some reason, they're not in the moral position to do it, but they feel the reason to be trying to police these other nations. And I found it, very enlightening to hear China's take on it, where they're saying that, look, Americans can't be the forefront nation uniting these people, because America is all up in everybody's business. The reality is, we're sovereign nations, and instead of trying to control what we do, we should just try to work together and basically allow us to do our thing and come together on that which we can come together on. And I honestly think that that's probably the most responsible take. That is a dominating global policy, and that's the type of thing that's going to push China in front of America as far as a world leader. But again, those are type of things. And you said something about that Trump did as far as the vaccine. To me, I give him a salute to that. That's the one thing that I felt like, he did have some urgency with it. There is some science behind that type of thing. I'm not a fan of how that side of the equation has completely resisted the science of vaccines. And we knew that there are terrible things that have been done, with vaccines and just all this type of stuff in the past. But there is still great science in what is actually done. So, I appreciate the fact that he will probably be a guy that can get more done, because Democrats won't tend not to be concerned about giving him a win. I think the Democrats lean more on policy than Republicans. And I think that, that Trump is a person that he can basically whip his Republicans in line. And if he can make some type of argument or some cross, whatever, I just think that you're talking about getting things done. But also this, you got to have power of the Senate and power of the House if you're the president to be able to do stuff. And if you're not going to give the president that, the president's hands is going to be tied. So go ahead. I pass it over to you, Brother Charles X.
Yes, sir. So the one thing that you touched on, and I'm going to save it for last because, to me, it is the number one issue of why that not only our people, but all the people should lean more towards Trump than the Democrats, and that is in regards to securing the borders. I'm going to say that for last because I got a lot on that, I think is there's definitely a lot to talk about in regards to that subject, but just in general, when we start, talking about, again, why Trump, over these Democrats is I got to start with, looking at the challenges that impact our community, the Black community, so-called Black community. I like to use the word more, but just for the sake of people knowing what I'm talking about, the Black America's top challenges today, as they exist is number one to me, and I think that most people who are objective would agree is the breakdown of the family. The father not being present in the home and not having a nuclear family, that's something that has completely, destroyed our community because, number one is that, a generational wealth is hard for that to even be created, and with just a single member of the household raising the children, and then from the standpoint of children, having, both that feminine energy and masculine energy, present. And this is assuming now a positive environment is being promoted, that child is going to be much stronger moving forward, in life than they are without it. So when you look at a lot of Democrat policies, you see, you don't really see that being a priority, at all, and especially when you start looking at it from, the LGBTQ side of things, it's just not something that is a priority, so when you start looking at conservatives, that is always a big focus on dealing with conservatives, and definitely the Trump administration is empowering families in particular. So that's definitely, one of the reasons. And then I'm going to briefly go through some of the other ones before I go back to the border. But before I transfer it back to the border, I'm going to throw it back to you, and then we could both go at it from on this border thing, because to me, that, and I think you agree, that's the most important, is the borders and war in general. But going back to why Trump over the Democrat, Trump showed us, that, he has a better a handle on the economy. Before COVID, like you mentioned, man, we were rolling. Things were looking, so well, for the country, and things were definitely moving in a positive direction, and a lot of that stopped, come COVID. Now, granted, when I say stop, there was all those free checks that people got, I'm saying, some people in jail because they got too much free money, and it wasn't supposed to be free money, the economy was definitely, doing a good job, prior to that COVID. When it comes to crime and punishment, when you look at our community, our communities are oftentimes plagued by violence, plagued by drugs, plagued by, prostitution, plagued by so many of these, things that are not a positive, and things that detract and harm our community, that under Trump, the policies that he was pushing, was shutting those avenues down to where people had to look in a different direction, and definitely had, motives, to think about, and deterrents to think about, okay, well, if I engage this type of activity, is this really in my best interest? Should I be, looking, towards a different direction? Under Trump, that was absolutely happening. I have plenty of different, scenarios I can highlight, that proves that, when it comes to disarming law-abiding residents, that's a Democrat, a talking point, and policies that they looked at enact, which is to take guns away from people who are legal law-abiding citizens, even though we know criminals don't care about the law, and they are armed to the teeth with weapons that are military grade oftentimes, and those of us that is in these larger cities in particular, like you, brother, that's in Southern California, out there near LA, or in LA, then we already know, some of the weaponry that's on the street and some of the carnage that has been left behind because of these this type of equipment being in the hands of criminals. Also, I would say that, let me kind of fast forward down here because I got my border issues, right here.
Hey, you know what? Let me, since you got your notes and you're not going to lose your place.
Yes, sir.
Let me respond to a few things. I will say that I don't think the Democrats have argued that they're trying to take guns away from you as much as trying to take certain type of guns. And as far as who has access to the guns, maybe that's a different type of situation. But you also got to understand that without saying too much on recorded video, let's just say that I've interacted with enough criminal people to understand who may have some of these type of weapons that you talk about, that they're very careful to not sort of like bring too much light to what they do, especially when it comes to civilians, as opposed to those that are sort of like in their own type of way. So, they value these things and understand that how dangerous and selective it is to use these things. So I'm not saying that it doesn't serve a responsible person to have a high-powered military grade weapon. My concern is that a lot of these situations where you're having these school shootings and stuff like that, those are the people that are using those type of weapons, and their access to them are what's creating these sort of like domestic problems. So, I want to color it. I don't just want to make it like an attack on the Democrats. Again, I'm not a Democrat, but I want to at least try to portray their position as at least how they present it to me. Whether they're lying about it, I'm not going to say. I'm just saying that that's not really the argument that I've heard them make. But sorry, if you can pick up where you were.
Yeah, no, go ahead, brother. I would just say, just as a quick little pushback, is that, if you talk with a lot of these Democratic politicians, they are not against having guns out of our hands altogether, out of everybody's hand, and just forbade and go against the Second Amendment, altogether, But
I don't know any of them. I don't know any Democrats that think like that. I know that Joe Biden always goes, look, I have a gun. I do hunting. I do. Most of the people I know that I'm sure there's some people that don't believe in guns and whatever and stuff like that. But, I live in Compton and pretty much everybody here believes in guns, as far as
sure. now you're talking about the voters now, I'm talking about politicians. What some of the politicians
I hear the politicians saying that they're not against guns, that they're against certain type of guns. I'm saying at least that's what I'm hearing.
Sure. No, there's definitely no argument in terms of the type of weapons that are one is allowed to access. I'm for one is, if for a fact that on the streets they have weapons that exist, out there, including, like you said, some of these school shooters, to me, is more about limiting the certain types of people, who have, a mental illness, getting a hold of these weapons. What I'm saying? So then it becomes a question, okay, who do you categorize as having these mental illnesses? One thing that's been, a group that's been sheltered more recently from school shootings, have been various, LGBTQ plus individuals that have cited, differences of opinion where how they felt with, heterosexual men in particular. We've seen some shootings that taken place from that camp. You see what I'm saying? But in general, mental illness, I think that we could agree that we don't want people who are mentally ill, have criminal intent, getting guns. So it's a matter of these politicians coming together and trying to figure that out. But I don't want to get too hung up on gun control in general. Because again, why I will say vote Trump over Biden is I got to go back to this issue and dealing with Ukraine. Ukraine, Trump held that whole situation off. It wasn't until Biden that came into office that, again, momentum picked up, funding was allocated, and now, Ukraine is being left at a major deficit of military-age males because so many of them have been killed in action and wounded. I mentioned how many people have been KIA, you know what I'm saying? But there's been almost an equal number that has been wounded, you know what I mean, at the same time. So that nation is really being devastated, by firearms that America has been, supplying this country with, when a peaceful solution, should have been dealt with. And Trump is someone who's better at bringing that about than who we have currently inside office. And in terms of Israel, I don't know. I don't know. I don't think that Israel would, or maybe even Hamas, maybe have had, engage in the actions, that ultimately that we're observing now, under Trump leadership, but I can't say that, that let's say Hamas still attacked, on that October 7th, would, Trump, support Israel in that situation and be moving like he is. I can't say that he'd be doing too much different. I just don't know in regards to that. You know what I mean?
He was a much bigger, more aggressive friend of Israel than the Democrats were.
You saying Trump is?
I'm saying he was. I can't say that he is. I
definitely heard that argument. But when you go look at
the reason why I say that is because what he recognized as being the capital of Israel, as far as the Democrats, and when I say Democrats, I should probably say particularly Obama and Biden have talked about the two-state whatever, whereas he wasn't really coming from that. So again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that was a person that when you talk about the conservatives, that was one of the things that they really liked about Trump, is because they feel, religiously a really big connection to Israel because of the Bible. So I'm just saying that's the position that a lot of people have taken. So I don't speak for anybody, and I don't know. I'm researching. I'm getting the information like everybody else. So I don't know. But I'm trying to be honest to at least what's been given to me, objectively from all sides.
Right. And there's definitely arguments, on that. So I don't want to belabor the point, but for sure, under Obama, he definitely had a relationship that was not kosher, if you will, for lack of better terms, with Netanyahu. We saw many situations where their exchanges wasn't always pleasant, and then from Trump's base, and being a lot of conservatives, they definitely lean more on the side towards Israel, in general. There's no doubt about that. But in terms of, and don't forget Trump, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, married Trump's daughter too. And he is Israeli, and definitely a Jewish American at the very least, So there's definitely some family ties that existed there, But again, not the, I think that could be a whole nother show, but just moving on, in terms of why Trump, and not as opposed to Biden, when it comes to the American troops and armed forces, Trump by far was doing a better job with morale, of the troops and building the military, up to be stronger and more relevant, whether that's good or bad, in the world.
Hands down.
You see what I'm saying? So being, one that one of the first things he did caused a lot of controversy because immediately upon being put in office, he banned all transgenderism, transgenderism, if I said that right, inside the military, which definitely ruffled some feathers of those on the left and whatnot, But, his position was, okay, we're not going to be funding, all this extra for our soldiers, when we need to be focused on one thing and one thing only, and that is killing our enemies, So, he definitely did that, and again, the thing is that with Trump is, I'm going to say a word and I'm going to have to define it because, not everyone, has an understanding of what it is. But when it was in regards to going after the deep state, man, Trump is a guy, and that's going to be a perfect segue as we come into the back to the border issue. What is the deep state? One might ask. My definition of dealing with the deep state is a clandestine network of members of the federal government, especially within the FBI and CIA, and non-elected government officials working in conjunction with high-level financial and industrial entities and their leaders, along with criminal enterprises to exercise power, influence over domestic and foreign policy alongside or within the United States government. So that's a long-winded, statement. But again, these are unelected, oftentimes, officials, who are making moves and who, regardless of who president is going to be, they're still there. You know what I'm saying? And so behind the scenes, there's always, intelligence and data and a group of people who are driving and steering this country in a direction that when a new president comes into play, they're either going in opposition to that force, which oftentimes that's not the case, or they're going to go ahead and go with the flow, which is traditionally what we've seen. So a lot of the problems that Trump has been seeing, has been in opposition to that deep state, and an example of, some of the thinking that goes on in the deep state, the deep state is there was a political strategist, that was a senior advisor back to Jimmy Carter back in the day. His name was Zbigniew Brzezinski, if I'm saying that right. He had this quote, and this quote was so cold-blooded, but it should really help us to understand, how these people think. And he said that, to put it bluntly, in earlier times, it was easier to control 1 million people than to physically kill 1 million people. Today, it is infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people. And this was a speech he delivered in London, November 17, 2008, at the Chatham House. So again, when you're dealing with thinking like this, it puts things more into perspective of, if you're going against that type of power, you're really in danger. So right now, I want to just take this time to really go into the number one reason for me why we should support Trump over Biden, which is dealing with these unsecure borders and this invasion/migration that we're dealing with. But is there anything else that you want to add before we get into this?
Yeah, before you go into this, I will say this. That was a beautiful definition of the deep state. And by definition, that absolutely exists. However, I think he was using a phenomena that exists as sort of a boogeyman, just like Antifa. The fact of the matter is, when you talk about when he really went off the hinges at some point, you're really thinking like, wow, how maniacal is the person that's controlling everything. You got a anonymous opt-in saying, we know Papa's a little crazy, but we're not going to let him get too crazy. So rest assured, he's going to do policy, he's going to do whatever, but don't worry, it ain't going to get out of control. And I'm just saying that I think that he might call something like that deep state, but the fact of the matter is, one thing that you liked about him, or that people liked about him, whatever, is that he was not coming from a political background. So you were basically getting someone outside of that in his position of power. And I would dare say he was a person that was corrupted by that, because I would say that he was a non-politician that became a politician, and then he became a super politician. It became to a point that, he made things so black and white that really didn't need to be black and white, and really just sort of like took positions that were not even the least bit founded. But the bottom line is he has so much power and sway over his following that they just blindly accepted. And it's like, now you can't even tell them anything, because the bottom line is, if it's not coming from him, they're not trying to hear it. And to me, that is dangerous. So again, this is one of the things, this was a criticism I had of him. I'm saying that, it doesn't make him not worthy of a vote. I'm just saying that this was a person whose feet didn't necessarily always touch the ground. And the deep state, which does exist after a fashion, it's a network that exists, but the reason why it was so much easier to control the world before is because the world was so small as far as media and all this other stuff. Now, people got many channels to look at, not just one news channel. They got many things to look at, social media versus TV. There's some people that don't even have TVs because all they do is watch YouTube. I can sit there and watch YouTube for 38 hours in a day if there was 38 hours. I mean, that's just how it is. So it's much more harder to dictate narratives today than it was back then. And that's why it was so much easier to manipulate people back now. But again, if you're shrinking the things that you're willing to listen to or give credit to, you're basically giving that man that power again. So I'm just trying to push back to say that, you talk about the deep state. I think that, maybe he went off the rails in that respect. And as far as the Antifa thing, that was definitely a boogeyman. But, I'm sorry, so, I didn't mean to hijack that, but go ahead.
No, but that's fine. Like let's just get on this border issue and let's just really see, is this deep state control an exaggeration, or is it something that is, actually more substantial than many of us even consider? And I think that as we look at this border issue, and the invasion/migration that's taking place right now, it'll shed some light on it, for sure. And then the other thing I would just say in terms of, the people, while it's harder to control the people today, is definitely, we have more access to media and information, and you can really control, to a certain degree, how informed you are. Now, granted, if people have to work, what I mean? It was funny earlier, Brother Walk was like, man, brother, how are you so informed on all these situations, what I mean? And my domestic life, I got to give a shout out to my wife, she's really helped me to be informed like I am, because part of my duties, of the household is to study and understand the reality of what is impacting ourselves, our children, our grandchildren, to take that information into consideration as we make decisions on how to move in this world. You see what I'm saying? So there's been different, strategies we've adopted that has allowed me to do that, now, albeit I'm having a less and less time to do that. But, in regards to these shows that I've been participating in, I'm thankful for you all for allowing me this opportunity, is I've definitely spent more time and allocated more time in this direction so that I can add value, to the content that we're presenting, what I mean? So, that's definitely a big portion of it. But again, the unsecured borders, the number one reason why we should be voting for Trump over Biden. Again, the Democrats' platform is globalism, open borders, whereas the Trump's platform is, we have to secure our elections, we have to secure our borders, much like, we're spending billions and billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars to defend other people's borders. What I mean? But the number one issue when it comes to the unsecured borders is, the human trafficking that's taking place, in particular, the child sex labor practice that's taking place, along these borders. I mean, it is sad, that what we see, and when I say see, I'm going to give us names of individuals and websites that have been documented. There's a group of brothers, brothers meaning literally they're brothers, to one another, family-wise. They went and they took the route that people take to come from Ecuador up to America. And in that process, when they almost made it to America, they were kidnapped by cartel, but they want to see firsthand how this takes place. They documented the whole journey, and it is wild, brother, of what we saw and what others have reported of what's going on. What I mean? Right now, you're talking about in the United States, the United States is the largest trafficker of children in the world. Children are being illegally kidnapped and brought across the U.S.-Mexico border and sold off to wealthy Americans as sex slaves and worse. And what's wild about this is the U.S. government has been complicit in this facilitating, and I'm saying this as a matter of fact, You know what I mean? It's not uncommon to where if people take the time and view the content of those who are covering the borders, you know what I mean, or go to the border themselves and these entry points and see what's taking place, you will see babies coming across this border who are 1 years and younger, who are completely drugged, looking like rag dolls, being brought over here by someone not their parents. You know what I mean? And you're talking about, since Biden has taken, been in power, this has increased exponentially, than what it was, when Trump was in power. The media knows a lot of this, has suppressed these stories, which is why, the moniker that Trump adopted long ago was, dealing with fake news. Fake news is not always being reporting, information that's not accurate. Sometimes it's about not reporting information at all, that impacts Americans and impacts, the people. These the migrants, when they're asked, in this transit, who they prefer, Biden or Trump, overwhelmingly and unanimously, they say Biden. And you can see this on video. It's wild. And when you look at, a lot of times, Americans, and others, they'll go establish residency in other parts of the world and get a second passport for a lot of different reasons. But here in America, man, you could literally just cross over the southern border and you're enjoying like zero paperwork, no criminal background check, no health inspection. You don't have to buy property, make an investment, and to gain access, to government programs, and benefits, ranging from free healthcare to childhood education. And many even offer free housing, complimentary bus transportation to the nation's most prominent cities, including airfare. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's unbelievable, how easy this residency program is available to citizens across the world. The only caveat is you can't go the legal route, which is, more bureaucratic, multi-year process that can test the patience of even the most enlightened Buddhist monk. The caveat is you had to just come illegally through the southern border, and expose yourself to a great amount of risk, along that journey, And so when you see some of these pipelines that have been created, bro, you talk about conspiracy theories, you're seeing conspiracy. Literally.
Not conspiracy theories, actual conspiracies, because it's real.
Yeah, it's actually real conspiracies. But you're seeing, federal government contractors contracting children across the country, possibly and oftentimes delivering them to the hands of human traffickers. Some of these contractors are CIA affiliate. It's but it's just amazing just how bad the situation is. We've had whistleblowers like Deborah Wright, who was a HHS, which is a U.S. Department of Health and Human Services whistleblower, who watched children being sold off and trafficked it right in front of her own Pomona, California office. Blew the whistle and was fired. We've seen by our Department of Homeland Security, their own estimates, over 85,000 migrant children have gone missing in the United States. And others have been subjected to involuntary servitude, debt bondage, commercial sex trafficking, and possibly even forced organ harvesting. But it is so sinister and so terrible that I understand why people don't want to look at it. Like my wife, for example, she don't even like to even hear the content because it's so disturbing and so dark and so wicked, that it could cause, people, their mental health. You see what I'm saying? The cartels, and this is the Department of Homeland Security, they estimate, and others estimate more, but the DHS estimates that it earns the cartel, the illegal smuggling of migrants, $6 billion a year. Other reports say $13 billion a year. Now you're talking about
because and just to point out, this is not just people coming from Mexico and stuff like that. You're talking about people from China, people from all these people are basically going through these networks because that's the thoroughfare, that's the ingress, that's the pathway that these people are taking to get in here.
Now, the only exception is the Chinese, which is a trip, is they seem to have their own networks set up to get them from, Ecuador, to Panama, through the Darien Gap, and onwards up into the United States. You know what I mean? To where, excuse me, they're staying in various hotels, where they can.
Yeah, I've seen
have
those documentaries.
Transportation via boat, which allows them from going the more dangerous routes where children and women are being raped and killed and murdered, along the way, But yes, across the world, you're seeing, everyone come over, Yemeni citizens, Iranians, So it's not only, this human trafficking, in terms of the children that are being exploited, but we're also letting various cartel members in that's supporting the drug trade here inside of America. The fentanyl crisis, which is the reason why the Democrats have been dealing with this situation now, is because they're getting hammered by their constituency, and then the election is going to be influenced by this subject, as it comes in 2024, is the fentanyl crisis is at an all-time high, and all this was predicted, prior to Biden being elected, because we already knew what his policy, was, in regards, to, the migrants who were coming up. And when I say U.S. agencies and companies facilitating, again, the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, we're seeing this private companies like NVM, who are federal contractors. They've been specializing in services for federal customers since 1987. They support agencies like Department of Defense, Justice, Homeland Security, Health and Human Services, the state, Social Security Administration, another organization called Southwest Key, which is a Texas-based nonprofit organization that operates shelters and facilities for unaccompanied immigrant minors and immigrant youth. They also provide youth justice alternative programming and educational programming. We're seeing these companies, various, entities, again, complicit, in helping, this migration take place. The United Nations have an international organization of migration, known as IOM, that literally hands out pamphlets, showing maps, detailing various routes to go, and even have pamphlets, teaching, migrants how to use condoms.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
So let me direct you to two things. First, direct you to the time, because we're already an hour and 30 minutes into this. So I think that what we can agree is that the person who was the champion of attacking the border, especially before it became the border crisis that it is now, was no doubt Trump.
No doubt Trump. But the number one reason why we should be supporting Trump over any Democrat.
Well, again, but I want to point this out. The fact of the matter is the Democrats have already evolved to the same position on the border. So I'm just saying that the fact that you're saying Trump, you can make an argument about that Trump was a person that solved this problem before, or basically he was ahead of it. You know what I'm saying? But the reality is they're both occupying the same space. It's really not an election point just because they're both very concerned about the border. It's just even back then it was a function of how it was to be instituted. But I mean, right. you got them talking about, I mean, Biden saying if the Senate, if the Congress gives me the power to close it, I will close it today.
Yeah, but that's the whole thing.
I'm saying, but if you can do that, because you keep saying, I heard you before on another show, you're talking about the Trump did that. Trump did not do it. When he tried to do it, the Congress actually got in the way, said that he didn't have that power. So that it was already established that the president didn't have the power to do it, that he needed the power granted from Congress. And I'm saying that the reality is he's telling you this. Whether you're saying it's a political ploy, I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying it's not. But the fact of the matter is, if they want it closed today, Congress could meet and decide on it, and it would be closed today.
Well, so I mean, I agree and disagree with some of what you're saying. The first thing is, and again, we should hammer this issue because I'm saying it's definitely the number one reason why we should support, Trump over Biden or any other Democrat is, the Democrats, they say this because again, we're in the election cycle right now, and now they are getting hammered for policies that they've been having in place for over 3 years that has created this situation. So just by that fact alone,
allow the situation to be.
Allow the situation to be. So that alone disqualifies them from even being, being able to say they now have this renewed focus, that they know what to do now, and they're going to be able to be the best person equipped to deal with it. Because again, they created the problem under Trump, bro. This stuff was, even with the limited powers he had, he did enough through executive decisions, and through his own political maneuvering to where the fentanyl was not flowing like it was, drugs was not flowing like it was, but that border was, not completely shut down, but way more than we did not have caravans of migrants coming up this way. That was all shut down. You know what I mean?
I would dare say this, that, all this is being said about the border crisis is real. The impact is real. I always have to clarify that I am a socialist. I don't, to me, a person from this country, from other country coming to this country for a better life is no types of threat to me, or nothing that I'm concerned about as far as that I wouldn't want them to have it. But I understand.
Then we have legal immigration.
What I wanted to clarify is that it's a difference between them and then you're talking about the cartel people, or you're talking about the terrorists, or whoever else might come across that route. So I just want to clarify that it's not that I'm against those people that have a genuine, there's just humanity seeking a better way of living. That I'm just saying I will not conflate that with the actual threat that is exposed by the others. So again, right. So I'm saying, that's why I'm saying that it's real, but I want to clarify, because a lot of people are saying well, we don't want all these immigrants over here because, it's a tax on the system and, taking jobs and stuff like that. And I think that's a legitimate argument for a person to make. But I take the position, and I'm only doing this as a disclaimer because my face is on the show, to say that I'm a person that believes that the world belongs to everybody. And I'm saying that I think there are enough resources for everybody. Some people have way more resources than other people. And if there was a reallocation of those resources, that, you would find that it wouldn't be such a terrible distribution that it is. And now, again, I'm not just talking about reaching in somebody's pocket and just throwing out to whatever. I'm talking about the people that have the power to do this stuff, themselves doing what it's due to take care of whatever deficiencies there are. But again, brother, we're kind of running out of the show here. So I think that you should probably kind of just sum up what you want to say and close it. And we're just going to have to finish the rest on another show.
Yeah, I would say let's do this. If time permits for you, I could do the 12:30, which would give us another 20 minutes to wrap up everything. You know what I mean? So if you could do that, then we could get through this, real quickly, because the only other thing, does that sound good to you?
Well, see, this is my problem. It sounds great to me, but my wife was already upset for me from something yesterday. And I'm just wondering how much more upset she's going to be if I don't, head on into
so let me go ahead and wrap this up. Yeah. And I'll give you some time to assess that.
I'm gonna let you say what you got to say, and we'll close it up because
Yes, sir. So the last point I want to make on this is I want to just do a shout out to some websites and some people helping to combat human trafficking, which is the Muckraker.com website that's run by Anthony and Josh Rubin. They've been doing an excellent job, exposing the reality of what's taking place on the border. Carlos Aureliano. Arellano, our former U.S. immigration contractor. I mentioned Deborah White, HHS whistleblower, Tim Ballard, who most people know from the movie Sound of Freedom. He's done a lot, obviously. Mel Gibson has a new documentary that he's been working on that's showing the underbelly of this trafficking situation, the other thing that I would say too is that people, when they think about motives of why the U.S. government is allowing this, one thing that a lot of people don't consider is there's such a thing called replacement migration, which is the need to prevent population decline and population aging resulting from low fertility and mortality rates. So some people are trying to bolster up their constituents, if you will, their citizens, by adopting these policies. But here inside of America, there's something even more sinister that I believe is at play, which is you'll see it coming from the Democrats in particular, is they want to give migrants a path to citizenship to serve in the military, using them to enforce policy that many patriotic Americans would not follow through with. So essentially, they want to create a new army with migrants who are not Americans, who come from this country, to serve in the military, so that because they're more prone to carry out orders coming from the federal government that regular Americans will be opposed to or against. That's something that we got to consider and that we have to look at. Without any doubt.
Well, I would dare say that that could be the motivation by it, or the motivation is to actually extend, the American experience to migrants, because that's what America is supposed to be about. I'm not saying that that's what it is. I'm just saying that, when we talk about narratives and motives, I'm just saying that I will not vilify the Democrats in that manner. So I think this is a good stopping point for us, Brother Charles X. And, you rock. You bring great information, and what's important about this show is to clarify that, look, you may not be a big fan of Trump, you may whatever, but the bottom line is it's not unreasonable to support him. And you got to understand that if you do oppose him, you better get your ass out there and vote, because the people that vote for him are way more passionate for him than they are for the other guys.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that.
So thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Charles X. And we'll do this again. And hopefully I'm not going to be in too much of trouble for going on this long. So
yeah, I hope not, brother. It's definitely a great show.
Thank you. Peace.
Peace.